I'm Pip Tomson and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya news headquarters. These are our top stories. Israel discuss imminent ceasefire plans with Hezbollah, which could bring an end to a 14-month conflict ignited by the war in Gaza. True to his word, Donald Trump promises to impose tax tariffs for goods arriving in the United States from China, Mexico and Canada when he becomes president. And Russia expel a British national on accusations of spying as they demand answers from the UK ambassador. A ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon could be struck within hours. That's according to Israeli and Lebanese officials. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to make a statement on the matter in the next hour. However, earlier today, the Israeli army attacked Hezbollah targets in the Beirut area after they issued evacuation orders for residents in the city. For more on this, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by our correspondent Sarah Coates. Sarah, good evening. Do we know what Netanyahu will say in his statement, which is expected in around an hour's time?
You're certainly right about that, Pip. It is widely expected that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will actually announce this ceasefire in Lebanon, this ceasefire with Hezbollah, and that will happen, as you said, in less than an hour. It's also very likely that he will say things along the lines of Israel adopting a zero tolerance policy, which means basically that if there is any kind of threat coming from Lebanon, that Israel will have the right to respond militarily. Now, also to appease his base, we can expect Netanyahu to say something along the lines that Israel's war goals in the south of Lebanon have been achieved, that Hezbollah has been basically eradicated in that area, and that it is safe potentially for the 60,000 or so internally displaced Israelis to be able to go home. Now, he has been holding this meeting with his security cabinet over the past couple of hours, and this ceasefire deal is largely based on the UN resolution 1701, which would mean that these Hezbollah fighters would need to push further north, back behind the Litani River, and that Israeli troops would completely need to pull out of Lebanon. Now, this would all be overseen by a five-body party. It would be headed up by the United States. And, Pip, on that, we are expecting a joint announcement from the US President Joe Biden and the French President Emmanuel Macron in just a few hours' time.
Despite this progress, Sarah, there seems to be no let-up in the attacks, though, with Beirut targeted by the IDF today. So could that affect any deal that's struck?
That's right. These negotiations have been happening under intense fire, and generally before there is any kind of a ceasefire deal, there will be a real uptick in hostilities, and that is exactly what we are seeing on the ground. It was only about half an hour or so ago that the IDF spokesperson, the Arabic spokesperson, put out a fresh evacuation order, the first of its kind since this war began, for targets in central Beirut. And there is absolute mayhem on the ground, people leaving by the thousands, trying to get out of the danger zone, with strikes reported since then. Now, the Lebanese health authorities have been saying that so far in that area, the death toll stands at 10 people. It is certainly expected to rise, given that this is a very densely populated area. And in addition to this, there have been strikes on the southern suburbs of Beirut, in Dasha, and also down in the Tyre region in southern Lebanon. So certainly an extremely deadly day in Lebanon. And as we go to air, red alert sirens are going off in these largely evacuated northern Israeli communities. There have also been a number of hostile aircraft threats coming in over the past minutes. So certainly no let-up of hostilities, Pep.
Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv, thank you very much. Turning to the United States now, and President-elect Donald Trump is making good on his campaign promises, and he's doing it in a hurry. The US President-elect has announced plans to slap hefty tariffs on America's three top trading partners on his very first day in office. In a post on Truth Social, he said he'll introduce 25% tariff duties on goods coming from Canada and Mexico, and add an extra 10% on those from China, which are already subject to some extra fees. Those nations have hit back at the decision, as Benji Hire reports.
Is Trump serious about tariffs? Well, it seems we have our answer. The former and future president is willing to blow up trade deals he signed in his first term on just day one of his second. Countries the world over are raising the alarm, but also urging caution, insisting it's too early to talk of countermeasures.
Last night's decision could be an indication that he is very serious. First, the EU must respond united to this and not tear itself apart into 2 or 3 blocks of countries, but speak as a united Europe. Second, we must make clear that ultimately everyone loses: the United States, the United States' economic area, and Europe.
The US policy on trade with China, with other countries as well, will have impact. And that is really an important element that we have to consider.
Mexico, China and Canada are the USA's top 3 suppliers of imported goods, accounting for about 42% of imports this year, roughly $1.5 trillion. Cars, electrical equipment, oil, grocery and household items. The domestic companies importing the goods will be the ones paying the price, not the foreign companies exporting them. And the cost may be passed down to consumers. Donald Trump insists the policy is in response to crime and drugs, he says, coming across the border, and that tariffs will stay in place until Mexico and Canada clamp down on illegal immigration. But the leader of Canada's most populous province, Ontario, fears these new taxes would be devastating to workers and jobs, while the head of Mexico's Senate points the finger back at the United States, claiming it's Americans who need to stop consuming drugs. And China, well, it calls the move irresponsible, warning no one will win a trade war, though there may be some relief in Beijing that Trump has cooled on the idea of a 60% tariff rate he'd once threatened. The markets have reacted only moderately, suggesting the risk of tariffs had already largely been priced in by investors, who were counting on Scott Bessent, the man Trump wants as his new Treasury Secretary, to prevent his boss from doing anything too rash. As 45th president, Trump pushed tariffs as a means of protecting American jobs. This time, as 47th president, the message is different, but the strategy is the same. Benji Hire, Arabiya News, Washington.
Let's get more on this from Washington by our correspondent, Kate Fisher. Hello to you, Kate. Now, part of the reason people voted for Donald Trump is to get more money in their pockets. Is that trust a bit misplaced in light of this tariffs plan? And do you think he's actually serious?
Well, you can never tell with Donald Trump, Pip, whether he is going to do exactly what he says. There are some analysts here who think the fact that he's made these announcements 2 months before he's even in the Oval Office suggests this is more of an opening salvo into negotiations. But there are others that say, you know, he does mean what he says. He's being very specific about this. Certainly, if he does do this on day one, it's not going to give countries much time for negotiation. Economists, though, generally agree that they don't think it's going to be good for the US consumer. American households, some suggesting it will cost them around $1,000 a year, these tariffs. That's because most of the companies that import the goods, which will then be more expensive to import, will pass those costs on to the consumer, the Americans who are buying them. There are concerns about job losses and the higher cost of groceries, for example. The US got more than half its fresh fruit from Mexico in 2022, so that's going to drive prices up at the supermarket.
Why does he want to target China more than Canada and Mexico, for example? And what is China saying about this?
Yeah, China and Trump have a long history of trade wars. And Trump, even on the campaign trail, was threatening up to 60% tariffs on China. So some may argue this is them getting off a bit lightly. His reasoning is that it's because they're not doing enough to crack down on illegal fentanyl trafficking. That's that really strong opiate that a lot of which is made in China. Donald Trump saying on Truth Social that they promised they would institute the maximum penalty, that of death, for any drug dealers, but unfortunately they never followed through. And this is his reasoning for why China should be getting even more tariffs. They have said that this is an irresponsible response, and they have said that no one will win if there's a trade war.
Finally, Kate, we know that quite a few eyebrows were raised over Trump's cabinet picks. And one thing that raised my eyebrows was wrestling star Hulk Hogan eyeing up a place in his administration. What can you tell us about that? Is it going to happen?
Well, certainly Donald Trump hasn't made any official announcements about Hulk Hogan, but he is a big Trump supporter. He spoke at that now famous rally in Madison Square Gardens in New York City, where Donald Trump went to New York, even though it's a typically Democratic stronghold, just before the election, and held this big rally. Hulk Hogan was one of the people speaking at that. He is certainly a big star and a big personality. Apparently, Hulk Hogan says that he was speaking to Donald Trump about nutrition and fitness at that rally behind the scenes, and Donald Trump suggested that he could lead the President's Council for Physical Fitness, but no official word yet from the Trump team.
OK. Sounds very interesting if Hulk Hogan arrives at the White House. Kate Fisher in Washington, thank you so much. Let's return to the ongoing ceasefire talks in Israel, and I'm joined now by Dr. Yossi Beilin, a former Israeli justice minister and initiator of the Oslo Agreement. Hello to you, Dr. Beilin. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me.
How optimistic are you that this ceasefire will happen and that it will hold, perhaps permanently?
From the Israeli point of view, it will happen. And I hope that also from the Lebanese point, and there will be a ceasefire very, very soon, in a few hours. So this is good news. And then about the sustainability of this ceasefire, that's another question. I can hope that it will be sustainable. The point is that as long as Hezbollah is a militia and a political party, it's very, very difficult to believe that it will not use its power eventually, maybe not very soon. But what we are seeing right now is apparently a decision of Iran to allow Hezbollah to have the ceasefire which it needs and to disconnect what's happening between Israel and Lebanon and what's happening between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Because the whole thing for Hezbollah was to insist upon solidarity with Gaza immediately after the crazy massacre by Hamas on October 7th last year. So now it is disconnected, and this is a good sign for me. I hope that it will be possible to continue the efforts towards ceasefire also in Gaza.
Right, because, sorry to interrupt, that's what I just wanted to ask you, Dr. Beilin, is this particular ceasefire deal, is it completely separate to Israel-Gaza war? Will it have any impact?
It is not separate at all. I mean, as I said, this was the reason or the excuse for Hezbollah to launch a war against Israel. And if there is no connection now, and the Hezbollah is ready for such a ceasefire, then Hamas is left alone in a very, very poor situation. Also under the criticism of the population in Gaza, which is suffering a lot, no doubt, from this war. And they know exactly who launched this war and what was the ramifications of this very, very cruel decision of Yahya Sinwar to launch such an attack against Israel. So I hope that there is a chance now to have a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, and that the suffering of the civilians on both sides will stop.
David Mentzer, an Israeli government spokesperson, suggested that Israel will have the freedom to conduct military operations inside Lebanon as part of this agreement. Now, why would the Lebanese and Hezbollah agree to this, given their strong opposition to this initially? And what does Hezbollah get in return?
Well, I'm not privy to the details of the agreement. It has not been exposed by the parties. So there are only rumors about it. And apparently each side is trying to emphasize what seems to it as a very important achievement. I think that in reality, at least that was the ideas hovering in the last days, is that there will be a special monitoring group of Americans, Frenchmen, and others who will monitor the implementation of the agreement, and that no step will be committed by any side as long as this monitoring committee doesn't decide who is to blame for the breaching of the future breach, if it happens, of the agreement. So it is not just, according to what I know, it's not just that Israel can decide whenever it wants that the Hezbollah breach the agreement, but it will go through a scanning process. So it is more complicated. And I believe that is something that also Hezbollah eventually had to agree to.
Dr. Yossi Beilin, former Israeli Justice Minister and initiator of the Oslo Agreement. So interesting to talk to you. Thank you for talking to us on W News.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. 4 bodies have been discovered and 5 survivors have been rescued after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea yesterday. Rescue teams are continuing to search the area south of the Egyptian coastal town of Marsa Alam, where the Sea Story went down. Protesters supporting the release of former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan are being tear-gassed by armed forces as they arrive in the barricaded area of Democracy Square in Islamabad. Khan is currently serving 3 years in prison on corruption charges, which he denies. A fight broke out in the Serbian parliament today between the government and its opposition. It's after a train roof collapsed and killed 15 people. The shadow government has accused the main party of not taking responsibility. 79-year-old rocker Sir Rod Stewart is confirmed as Glastonbury's first headline for 2025. Sir Rod Stewart will return to the Pyramid stage on the last day of the music festival. And the world's oldest man has died at the age of 112 in Southport in England. John Tinniswood was born in Liverpool in the United Kingdom in 1912, the same year the Titanic sank. John previously said the secret to staying healthy was practicing moderation. Moving on to Russia now, where a British national who worked at the UK embassy in Moscow has been expelled from the country after being accused of spying. They're the seventh British diplomat to be expelled from Moscow since August. Earlier today, the British ambassador to Russia, Nigel Casey, was pictured arriving at Russia's defence ministry for questioning. For more on this, I'm joined from Moscow by our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Hello to you, Dasha. Thanks for talking to me. What more can you tell us about this expulsion?
Yes, indeed. We understand that the Russian Federal Security Service has released the information that they had proof that the second secretary of the political department of the British Embassy in Russia, Edward Wilkes Pryor, has been conducting espionage and saboteur activities in Russia. Following that, we have seen the Russian Foreign Ministry summoning the British ambassador to Russia, Nigel Casey, and after having spent there about an hour, we understand the Russian Foreign Ministry has issued a statement saying that they give 2 days to this prior employee at the embassy to leave the Russian Federation, because Moscow says it is not going to tolerate any activities of the foreign intelligence in Russia. And they also insist that while receiving accreditation and credentials to work in Russia, this employee has submitted the wrong information. So Moscow says it is yet another case where it is expelling the British diplomat. Keep in mind that earlier this year we have seen 6 British diplomats already being expelled from Russia, also on accusations of the espionage.
What about the timing of all this, Dasha? And is this the latest ploy from Putin to paint the UK as the enemy?
Well, certainly the timing is quite escalatory, if you would like to put it this way, because we have seen the relations between Russia and the West going from bad to worse, and Russia is accusing the Western countries of being involved into the conflict in Ukraine by allowing Ukraine to use their long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia. We understand that Storm Shadows supplied by the United Kingdom have already attacked the facilities on Russia's sovereign territory, and Russia says that it is the Anglo-Saxon world, as they often refer to the Western countries, and particularly the United Kingdom and the United States, that are trying to defeat Russia strategically. We've heard the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, early on Tuesday saying that any discussion about preventive strikes against Russia, any discussions about the possibility of defeating Russia strategically, they come from only one thing: the eternal desire of the Western countries to destroy Russia. And this is the ultimate goal, which Moscow says the Western countries are no longer trying to conceal. So from the Russian perspective, it is yet another case. But again, the timing, you can take any moment and say it is going from bad to worse, because certainly the relations between Russia and the West have not been experiencing any sort of relief, only getting worse and worse over the course of the past years.
And winter is fast approaching. And many people might think with the very cold weather, the fighting might slow down. But actually, it looks like Russia is making gains. And how important, Dasha, are those gains?
Well, certainly the Russian Defense Ministry has been talking about gains the Russian military have been making over the course of the past months, and those are the gains and the improvement of their combat positions. However, keep in mind that the Ukrainian troops are still controlling large swaths of Russia's Kursk region, where they have started the incursion earlier this year. We also hear in the Russian Defense Ministry saying that they are going to achieve their goals one way or another, be it militarily or by other means. So certainly the situation for the Russian military could change come winter, but it will also change for the Ukrainian military. So in terms of importance of those gains, they are improving the positions, they are also moving the front line, they are also moving the possibility of Ukraine to strike targets deep inside Russia, further away from the Russian borders, and also taking the front line away from the civilian population, because just on Tuesday we've heard a settlement in Novokakhovka in Russia, in the Kherson region, being targeted by the Ukrainian military. At least 4 people, 4 civilians, we understand, were killed after the bus was shelled by the Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, what we are also hearing from the Russian military is that they are preparing their retaliatory actions against Ukrainian use of long-range weapons supplied to Kyiv by the Western countries, because the Russian MOD has confirmed on Tuesday that there have been 2 incidents where ATACMS missiles were actually used by Ukraine just over the course of the past 3 days.
Dasha, Chernyshova in Moscow. Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the top business news. And British car manufacturer Vauxhall have announced plans to close its Luton factory in England next April. More than 1,000 jobs are at risk, but parent company Stellantis said it hopes to transfer hundreds of workers to the group's other site in Ellesmere Port in Cheshire. The Walt Disney Company has agreed to pay a $43.3 million legal settlement that alleged its female employees in California earned $150 million less than their male counterparts over an 8-year period. As part of the agreement, Disney will keep a Labour economist on board for the next 3 years to analyse pay equity amongst staff. Saudi Arabia's total expenditure for 2025 is projected at $342 billion. That's after a cabinet meeting chaired by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the kingdom's budget earlier today. The total estimated revenue for the next year is $315.73 billion, indicating a deficit of $26.88 billion, or 2.3% of the country's GDP. International banking firm Citigroup is cutting the number of year-end promotions as the company looks to keep costs down. Around 2,000 employees could see an increase in pay and titles next month, as opposed to the usual 8,000 in previous years. Bringing you a bit of sports news now, and US car maker General Motors could enter Formula One in 2026 with a luxury Cadillac. The American manufacturer will name a new team and build its own engine, that is if the application is approved. They would become the 11th team to Formula One for the 2026 season. And in football, Tottenham Hotspur goalkeeper Guglielmo Vicario has undergone surgery after playing with a broken ankle against Manchester City at the weekend. The Italian keeper was given treatment in the first half following a collision with City's Savinho, but played the full 90 minutes during Tottenham's 4-0 win. Prosecutors in France have asked for the maximum 20-year sentence for Dominique Pelicot, the man behind the country's mass rape trial. Pelicot has admitted drugging his then-wife, Giselle Pelicot, and encouraging other men to sexually abuse her in their home for over a decade. 49 other men are also on trial for taking part in the abuse. For more on this, I'm joined from Paris by our correspondent, Ross Cullen. Hello to you, Ross. Now, this is a case which has drawn attention from all over the world, and prosecutors are seeking a tough sentence for Pelicot as a result.
Yeah, that's right. The front cover of the latest edition of Vogue Germany was dedicated to Giselle Pelicot, with "No More Shame" as the headline on the front cover of the magazine. It is a case that has stunned France, that has shocked the world, and has been followed around the globe. Prosecutors confirming that they will be asking the judges to apply the maximum possible sentence of 20 years to Giselle Pelicot's now former husband, Dominique Pelicot, who had admitted drugging his wife and then recruiting men online to come to their family home to have sex with Gisèle Pelicot. And we can go into some of the claims by the defendants a little bit later on. But Dominique Pelicot has been at the heart of this case for orchestrating the abuse that was taking place over a 9-year period to his wife in the family home. We have seen massive demonstrations in recent days in France because yesterday, November the 25th, was the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and then a couple of days earlier, huge demonstrations across France in support of all victims of rape and attempted rape, and especially in support of Gisèle Pelicot. Since this trial has been going on this autumn, she has become a feminist icon for waiving her anonymity and asking for this to be a public trial with all the video evidence and everything that has been taking place in the court. She has been praised for her bravery and also the support from people around the world for what has taken place.
Have we heard from the 49 others who are on trial with Dominique Pelicot?
Yeah, that's right. 51 men on trial, 50 of them in court. Dominique Pelicot and 49 others, one man being tried in absentia. We have heard from some of the defendants. More than 30 of them have said that they don't believe that they are rapists. It's not something that is in their mind, their mentality. It's not them. It's not who they are. Despite the fact that there is video evidence of the abuse taking place, they have said that they thought they were taking part in a game. They believed that Gisèle Pelicot was pretending to sleep. They believed that they were being invited into the family home to take part in a couple's fantasy game orchestrated by Dominique Pelicot. There has been also support for some of these men from their family members saying they can't believe that this man could be a rapist. It's not who he is. But that has been a call that we have also heard from some of the demonstrators throughout this autumn. There have been weekly demonstrations in support of Gisèle Pelicot who have said that they believe that men who carry out a sexual assault could be anybody. They're not specific, quote, monsters. They could be a brother, an uncle, a friend, a father, a work colleague, just a regular person. They're not particularly, they want to get away from this idea that rape is something that happens only with a man that they've described as a monster. This has been a real driving force of this case in the demonstrations. The rape can be carried out by any man at any time, particularly a family member.
Ross Cullen in Paris, thank you. Let's remind you of our top stories. Israel discuss imminent ceasefire plans with Hezbollah, which could bring an end to a 14-month conflict ignited by the war in Gaza. True to his word, Donald Trump promises to impose tax tariffs for goods arriving in the United States from China, Mexico and Canada when he becomes president. And Russia expel a British national on accusations of spying as they demand answers from the UK ambassador. And that's just about it from us on W News. Thank you so much for your company. Tom Burgess-Watson talks to you next on GNT. A very good night.